Okay, welcome everybody to today's Invasive Species Week webinar, the first of our series for this week. I will introduce our speaker in a minute, but I'm just going to quickly run through some housekeeping things before we start. So the first is just to mention that we're recording the webinar today, so it will be available afterwards for anyone who can't attend, or if you have any issues with your connection and it drops out, don't worry, because we will make it available. Yeah, if you are having any problems, you can put a note in the chat box and I will keep an eye on that if you can't hear us for any reason. But otherwise, I just suggest logging off and joining again with the link that you have, and then hopefully that should sort things. And the final is that, yeah, we will have so we've got a couple of talks and then we'll have some time for questions afterwards. So if you can add any questions to the chat box or the Q&A function either, we'll go through those at the end, just to kind of keep things on track. But yeah, I think that is everything from me. So I am so pleased to introduce Professor Helen Roy. Thank you very much, Helen, for joining us to launch Invasive Species Week. Yeah, it's really good to have you here, and I'm glad that you're feeling better after COVID. It seemed to be a bit of a jinx for you for getting COVID, so hopefully not next time. But yeah, I will hand over to you, Helen. You can get started.
Great, thank you very much, Lucy, and I'm really delighted to be with you all today. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
Perfect, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be with everyone today and to be right at the very start of Invasive Species Week. Always a really exciting week, and wonderful to think of all of the activities that are going on around the UK in support of mitigating the threat of invasive non-native species. So I'm Helen Roy, and I'm from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology and the University of Exeter. And I'm just going to give an overview to invasive non-native species, and specifically highlighting that they are a major and growing threat to people and nature, but very much focusing on messages of hope and optimism. And I think that that's very much what Invasive Species Week is all about. Let's see if I can move the slide on. There we go. I think that many of you perhaps have seen this curve or similar curves showing these declines in biodiversity over time, and have heard about the concept of bending that curve of biodiversity loss. If everything carries on as it is now, that business as usual, then we would anticipate this kind of plummeting, or the continued plummeting of biodiversity. But actually, we know that at the moment, things aren't business as usual. Actually, climate change is worsening, land and sea use change is worsening, and we're seeing an increase in the number of invasive non-native species globally. So that trajectory could actually be even worse. But we do know that with increased conservation efforts and also with other efforts along, it really is possible to bend that curve of biodiversity loss and to see a much brighter future going forward. So just to remind everyone of the definitions around invasive non-native species. Non-native species are animals, plants, and other organisms that have been introduced by human activities from one part of the world where they naturally occur to another part of the world where they would not occur had it not been for those human activities. So it's those human activities that's really important in this definition. Invasive non-native species are a subset of all of those non-native species that are known to have established and spread and have some kind of negative impact on nature, and many of them also have negative impacts on people as well. And we can see from this variety of photos, the sort of wide range of different plants and animals and other organisms that are captured by this definition of invasive non-native species. And back in 2019, when there was a global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystems, invasive non-native species were identified as one of the 5 major causes of biodiversity loss, alongside climate change and land and sea use change, for example. And then last year, the IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, published the thematic assessment report on invasive alien species and their control, and I was really fortunate to play a part in that and to enjoy the 4 years of developing that assessment. And this is just to give some headline figures from what's a very, very big report, but you can access all the chapters for that report. They're all laid out beautifully now online on the IPBES website, and there's also a summary for policymakers and a variety of fact sheets that you can take a look at as well. But just to give some of those headline figures of invasive non-native species globally, 37,000 established alien species have been introduced by human activities worldwide, and we're seeing that figure grow by about 200 new alien species every year. Of all of those established alien species, and sorry to switch between alien and non-native, I'm meaning exactly the same thing, but in the UK we use non-native and many other parts of the world use alien, but they're synonymous. There's about 3,500 invasive alien species, so they are the ones with the negative impacts on nature and also on people. And just to give a few of the sort of headlines of the impact figures, 60% of global species extinctions have been caused solely or alongside other drivers by invasive alien species. I think that's a staggering proportion, and really just alone demonstrates if we can address the threat of invasive non-native species, we really can make a huge difference in addressing global species extinctions. Then looking at the global annual costs of biological invasions, it's estimated to be about $423 billion. But we know that that's a huge underestimate because this is just presenting an amazing study, but that only really can capture the tangible costs. So it's a figure that, as more and more information is made available, is of course going up. But for sure, it's a huge, huge number. And then if we look at all of the documented impacts for these species, so that's the positive and the negative impacts that they might have, noting that all invasive alien species, 100% of them have negative impacts, but of all of the impacts that can be found that they're having on nature and on good quality of life, and also nature's contributions to people, so nature's contributions to people being equivalent to ecosystem services, things like pollination and pest control, we can see that overwhelmingly the impacts are negative. 85% of impacts on nature and good quality of life are negative, and 80% of impacts on nature's contributions to people are negative. If we have a look at the numbers globally, and again, this is coming from chapter 2 of the assessment, we can see that invasive non-native species occur everywhere. And we can see that over time, so each of these little panels of graphs for different taxonomic groups shows the numbers of alien species over time, and we can see they're all going up in all the different regions of the world. And this is to take us back to Britain. So one of the things that we do within Britain is to produce an annual indicator. So our sort of annual trend lines, just as those I showed you for the global picture. And perhaps not surprisingly, we see a very similar picture in terms of the numbers going up over time in freshwater, marine, and also terrestrial systems. And we know this, and we are able to have a good understanding of non-native species within Britain because we have this partnership that pulls together information through the non-native species information portal that gets delivered through the non-native species secretariat website. And this information portal relies on partnerships working and collaborations amongst people to deliver that information through a central database, but also to gather occurrence information so we know where species are and how their distributions are changing over time. And this is work that's been funded by DEFRA since 2008 and really provides a fantastic source of information, not only for informing policy, but also for research and indeed for feeding into, for example, that IPBES report. An important part of this GB non-native species information portal also is the alert system that's run, and many people would have heard in the news this morning about the Asian hornet, and that's one of the species for which people are reporting through the alert system as part of this DEFRA-funded project. So this is how it looks if you go online and look on the non-native species secretariat. This is the portal, and you can search for any non-native species that you happen to think about. And there's information for over 3,000 species within this portal. And then you'll see there's a lot of other information available as well in terms of the risk analysis that might have been done, a gallery of photos that can be used by anyone, ID sheets, and what kind of management might be put in place. So a really rich source of information within the non-native species secretariat website. And of course, you can find out more information about Invasive Species Week on the Non-Native Species Secretariat website as well. And it's really exciting to think of all of the activities that are going on. And I think, you know, I've already presented a kind of picture of gloom in terms of these rising numbers and these huge impacts and the growing threat. But just through raising awareness through, for example, Invasive Species Week, or indeed local action groups taking action on the ground, then these are really the ways in which we can address invasive non-native species. So although it's a growing problem, it's a problem for which we really can make progress in terms of mitigating the threat. And I think in terms of making that progress, one of the strong messages that came out from this IPBES report, from this global assessment of all the information that's out there on biological invasions, is that people and partnerships are absolutely critical to curbing the threats from invasive non-native species. And I mentioned that there's a variety of fact sheets, so you don't have to read the many thousands of pages for this report. You can just go to the fact sheet and you'll find out more information there, for example, on stakeholder engagement. But we know that in terms of addressing invasive non-native species, that it's important that we all work together and that we show that kind of commitment and collaboration across borders, as well as within borders, and ensuring that we have good information systems such as the GB Non-Native Species Information Portal is a critical part of that. But the engagement is also a really important part of it. And I think it's really inspiring to think what the Non-Native Species Secretariat have been doing over the years in terms of engaging people and calling for action. And I really have the great privilege of being out and about in the world talking about non-native species with people from many different countries. And definitely Britain is seen to be leading the way in terms of engaging people through things such as the Check Clean Dry and the Bee Plant Wise campaigns. And there's a huge amount of information that you can find on the Secretariat website about these campaigns. They're really, truly inspiring and really making a difference. And just to give one particular other example, we know that citizen science and people getting involved in recording invasive non-native species is also extremely important for informing action. And you probably can't help but have noticed all of the publicity around Asian hornets and Vespa velutina. And the first record of the Asian hornet was back in 2016 for Britain. But it's been an amazing success story of people being on the ground, recording and reporting their potential sightings of concern. And you can see from this line graph at the top quite the number of sightings that are coming in year on year by people just being really vigilant. But these are just potential sightings. So most of these are European hornets or other species that look very like the Asian hornet. But because people are being so vigilant and so dedicated to sending in reports of concern, it means that the few sightings that then are Asian hornets can be teased out and there can be action taken on the ground to remove the nests. Last year, there was a definite increase in the number of nests that there had been from previous years. And this year, surveillance is as important as ever. And it is very busy on the alert system at the moment, but that's fantastic that people are getting involved. They're sending in their sightings of concern. And thankfully, still so far, mostly it is all about other species of insect. But it's great that we have these systems in place and that people are getting involved in this alert system. I think another really important way in which we can make a dramatic difference is through managing invasive alien species on islands. And this is because on islands, invasive non-native species are having a really major impact. And I've been really fortunate to do some work funded through the UK government, but also funded through Darwin Plus, to be able to work across all of the UK overseas territories, which are really amazing places with amazing people working to safeguard the really unique wildlife that's found within those places. And the current project that I have at the moment is to essentially create non-native species portals for all of these UK overseas territories. And when I've been really fortunate to go and visit people on the territories and work together to think about how we can make these systems the best possible way for the people on the ground, I get to see this incredible work that's going on. So this is on St. Helena, where the biosecurity team is in action, and you might recognize now more in the picture there in the middle. And we were stranded on St. Helena, so we asked if we could go along and help when a ship was coming in with the produce. And I'm not sure we were any help, but we got to see the inspiring work that goes on in terms of safeguarding the unique wildlife on St. Helena by controlling what is coming in to the island. And this is a picture of Vanessa Williams, who manages the endemic plant nursery on St. Helena. And this shows the little foil packages or all the seeds that are going into a seed bank. And then these amazing endemic plants that they're managing to grow, ready in some cases to be introduced back in the wild or to supplement those already out in the wild once invasive non-native species have been cleared. So that kind of restoration work is really cutting edge and amazing to see happening in places like St. Helena. This is, I'm taking you around the world with some lovely sunny pictures, but it's sunny here in Oxfordshire, so hopefully you've got some sunshine outside as well. But on Anguilla, for example, and I could give examples from all of the UK overseas territories of the amazing, amazing work that they're doing. But this is Dog Island, one of the outer islands of Anguilla, and they had a very successful rat eradication campaign, such that now Dog Island is clear of rats. And to go and visit that island and just see and hear I was going to say buzz of birds, but that's what bees do, I guess. So it shows I'm an entomologist. But this like thriving bird populations now on Dog Island, but also the vegetation structure that's then returning are really incredible to see. But of course, it's ongoing work to ensure that there isn't a re-invasion, and it's incredible to see what people in Anguilla are doing to manage that. So I currently have a project at the moment, enhancing monitoring and prevention of invasive non-native species across the UK overseas territories, working with all of the 14 overseas territories to compile this information and to work with amazing people such as those that you can see here. So everything I'm describing is through collaborations and partnerships that are really ensuring that we have the best available information to inform decision making. And this is another picture showing a whole range of the people that we've collaborated with over the years, starting with doing some horizon scanning and making predictions about which could be the species that pose the greatest threat to these islands, just as we have done the same in Britain. But through working in partnership and collaboration, of course, we learn a lot. We learn a lot about biological invasions, but we also learn a lot about what kind of information is there, what knowledge gaps we have, how can we fill those knowledge gaps, and how can we really take these big steps forwards to have the best information possible to inform action and to really begin to bend that curve of biodiversity loss. And so this is from Cyprus. This is CIDAS. This is their GB-NSIP, if you like, but for Cyprus. So it was based using Darwin Plus funding on our GB non-native species information portal, and is just fantastic. I really invite you to go and explore CIDAS and to see the associated information that's coming in through iNaturalist to inform that. And that work's been led by Kelly Martineau and Yakovos Demetrio, who've really done fantastic work on that system. And so now we've been implementing that across all of the overseas territories, but we've also been thinking about which species might have the greatest potential to spread, which could be eradicated. And again, using information, but also working in collaboration with communities who really have fantastic expert knowledge to inform some of the decisions and some of the action planning going forward. And this is just to show some of the latest resources that we've been putting together, because I think a really important part of that decision making is around raising awareness. This is about getting everyone aware of the threat of invasive non-native species, whether they be people working in customs or people working in nurseries and garden centres or people working in national parks. It's important that people really have an understanding of the magnitude of the threat of invasive non-native species, but what they can do to make a difference, perhaps through their own biosecurity or perhaps through specific management campaigns. And we've put these postcards together, illustrating some of the species for Gibraltar, are the two either side, the left and the right, and in the middle is the guide for Antarctica. And really excitingly, just as Invasive Species Week is happening, Kevin Hughes from the British Antarctic Territory is taking these guides to the Antarctic Treaty meetings to highlight to others and to begin for them to be used within the tourist industry, for instance, to really highlight people the importance of biosecurity and preventing the introduction of further species to Antarctica. So it's been a real pleasure to be with you all. And just to summarize, invasive non-native species are a major and growing threat to biodiversity, ecosystems, economies, and well-being. But curbing the threat is truly achievable, but it is urgent. It's important that we're doing things now. And collaborations and partnerships are absolutely critical to addressing all global environmental issues, including biological invasions. But I will also say, and I know that we will all experience this throughout Invasive Species Week, and I'm looking forward to the other talks that I'm going to be giving and the people I'm going to be meeting throughout the week. The importance and the joy of engaging with people in predicting, documenting, and managing invasive non-native species is also part of this story. So thank you very much for inviting me to be with you, and wishing everyone a wonderful week, and looking forward to questions if you have them.
Thank you, Helen. That was brilliant. Obviously, some sobering statistics in the report, but really inspiring. And yeah, like you say, there's a lot that we can do. And yeah, all really important work. I also think you were very modest about your role in it, Bess, and was co-chair of the report, so played, a huge role in that and in raising awareness of this globally. So yeah, lots of really fantastic work. Before we move on to questions, so if anyone does have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A while you have them in your head. But I will just quickly just talk about Invasive Species Week and then some of the things that we're really keen to kind of promote to people as like actions that people here can do to help prevent the spread. So I will do that quickly and then we'll move on to questions for everyone. That in the right format? That look okay? Yep. Yeah, so as you know, this week is Invasive Species Week, so it's all about working together to raise awareness of invasive species, their impacts, and how everyone can help prevent their spread. There's lots of organisations all across the UK, Ireland, Jersey, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man that are running events and activities throughout the week. There's lots of information on our website, so you can go there and find out what's going on, but I'll just talk quickly through some of the kind of highlights. So each day we're looking at a different question around invasive non-native species. So today our theme is, what are they? So thank you to Helen for giving such a great introduction to the week. I think you really set the tone, and it was just a perfect introduction. So Tuesday we'll be looking at how they're spread. Wednesday, why there are problems, looking at some of the impacts, how they kind of interact with climate change, that sort of thing. On Thursday, we're looking at what's being done to tackle them. So I think a lot of the people on the call already are kind of involved with invasive species, so probably working on them all year round. So this is a really great chance to promote the work that you're doing, talk about what you're doing and how everyone's working together. And then Friday, the focus is how can I help? So this is when we'll be really kind of pushing sort of simple things that people can do to help prevent the spread and reduce their impacts overall. So Helen started our daily webinar series this week, but we have lots more speakers. So if you've enjoyed today, definitely recommend having a look at those and seeing what else is going on. Helen talked about some of the fantastic work that's happening on the overseas territories. So on Thursday, we've got a talk from the Anguilla government and Anguilla National Trust about what's happening there. So that would be a really good one. I definitely recommend joining that. And then just to kind of quickly run through sort of 5 simple things that people can do. So this is one of the most important messages that we really want to share this week. So what people can actually do to help. So the first is to check, clean, dry. So keep boots, clothing, footwear and equipment used in water free of invasive non-native species. So just remember to check, clean, dry after use. This is to stop the spread of invasive aquatic plants and animals. So we're particularly concerned about these. They can be more invasive than terrestrial species. We have over 50 already introduced to our water. So really keen to prevent these from being spread around. They have enormous impact on ecosystems, but also on recreation as well. So preventing things like angling and paddling. Tomorrow we'll share an update on this summer's Check Clean Dry Border Biosecurity campaign. So that's something that we do to reach recreational water users that are travelling abroad. And there's lots of free materials that you can order. So Check Clean Dry packs for angling, paddling, sailing and rowing clubs. Second is to be plant wise, so don't let garden, pond, or aquarium plants enter the wild. So on Wednesday, we're launching our new Be Plant Wise webpage for professional horticulturalists, and we'll be kind of having an overall sort of push of the campaign. Again, there's lots of free materials available, including guides to gardening without invasive plants. So these have lots of Be Plant Wise hints and tips, and over 160 plants that you can use in place of invasive species. The third is to look after pets, so never release them or allow them to escape into the wild. Obviously, it's cruel, it can be harmful to pets, they can't always survive in the wild, and it can obviously harm other wildlife. So terrapins are a well-known example of this happening in the past, and we still receive sort of semi-regular reports of sightings in like local ponds and lakes. The fourth is to record alert species sightings. So Helen's mentioned Asian hornet, and there's lots in the press today about that species. But yeah, it's about looking out for Asian hornet and then some of the other alert species. So included these here. We've just launched a new alert poster today, so you can order those and find information on how to report sightings on our website. And then finally, Helen mentioned the local action groups. So if you do like being outside, definitely consider volunteering with a local action group work on invasive species management. So there are over 70 groups across Britain are working to protect local wildlife and ecosystems. They play such an important role in management and awareness raising. Yeah, and definitely look out for lots from them throughout the week. They'll be talking about their work, and a lot of them will be very busy out managing invasive species. So there'll be lots to see. So you can find details of everything on the Invasive Species Week pages of our website. Thank you to everyone supporting Invasive Species Week. Please do keep us updated with what you're doing, and we will definitely help to promote these. So yeah, we now have some time for questions, and I will stop sharing and check the chat box and Q&A. It's loading very slowly. Okay, so we have a question. Okay, this one will be very relevant to you, Helen. So thinking of an ends from the previous decade, is there a realistic hope of managing and reducing harlequin lady numbers?
That is a really excellent and topical question. I think that there is nothing that we can do to reduce the numbers. I think in terms of, I spent some of my time yesterday verifying ladybird records within iRecord, because I still run the scheme as a volunteer, which gives me immense pleasure. That's for all of the ladybirds in the UK, and we're still getting a huge number of sightings of harlequin ladybirds, and still within the sort of, particularly in the southern parts of Britain, really 80 to 90% of the ladybirds that we see in urban areas will be harlequin ladybirds. There's nothing that we can do. Their numbers are likely to now, they've pretty much sort of saturated where they are in the southern parts. We've just rerun the analysis of which we did and reported on quite a number of years ago, where we showed that there was a strong correlation between the harlequin ladybird and declines in some native ladybird species. And we've just been working on that again, and sadly still species such as the two-spot ladybird are still really struggling, but I will say that I saw quite a lot of records coming through yesterday. So I think that while there's nothing we can do about the harlequin ladybird, we learnt a lot from it in the way of reporting non-native species, and indeed have implemented that for reporting of the alert species that Lucy mentioned. And yeah, I don't have any further updates to say other than, yeah, it was a definite lesson in that it would have been a great species not to have been introduced, and the importance of prevention.
Yeah. Just to give a couple more minutes for any other questions. I have one actually. How have you found the response to the At Best report? So obviously you've been doing a lot, going out and talking about the report. How have people received it?
Yeah, it's been so exciting actually. Since the report was published in September, we as a team of experts have given a huge number of presentations all around the world, and there were more than 5,000 media articles, for instance, associated with it, which was incredible interest globally. But then when we've been out and about talking about it, it's been really heartening to know that countries are finding the value within the information that's been provided. We gave some presentations to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and one of the big messages, there were a lot of big messages that came out from the ABS report, but one of them was around capacity building, and again, this importance of knowledge and sharing and partnerships and collaboration, and knowing that some regions of the world really don't have very much information available to them to make decisions. And it's been really exciting I've been working with the IUCN team, and also others from, for example, Aileen Mill at Newcastle University and Olaf Boyd from the Secretariat, to be putting some of the information and ways of working that we perhaps take for granted in terms of information systems into a sort of toolkit that could be used by other people around the world, particularly those where they may have limited capacity or limited resources. So I think that's been a very exciting specific uptake from increasing the kind of understanding of the magnitude of the threat of invasive non-native species. So yeah, it's been exciting to see the way in which it's been used.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions now. So as a full-time flood defence asset inspector, I spend most of my time walking watercourses where I come across various invasive species. There used to be an app where we could record as we went along the rivers. Is there an app available? I mean, I can answer
Yeah.
this one if you like. Yeah.
Go for it, Lucy.
So yeah, there's lots of different ways to record invasive species. You can use iRecord, the website, for recording sightings of any species, including alert species, which we're particularly keen to hear about. There's also the InsMapper app. So if you're recording kind of widespread species, things like knotweed or Himalayan balsam, you can use the app to do that, and that will help records get to local action groups that are kind of managing invasive species. So yeah, if you go to our website, there's a page on recording, and that has lots of links to different resources that you can use. Okay, so next question. Sometimes when I'm out and about, I see lots of Himalayan balsam, drives me mad. Am I allowed to just pull it up if I'm in a public place or by a roadside? So I think with that one, I would check first with the landowner, probably report it to the landowner. Maybe contact a local action group just to make sure, you know, that you're working sort of with the kind of management work that's already going on. So yeah, I think probably do that. Another question. So other than ensuring you have good signage to remind anglers to check clean dry, what do you think are the most effective ways to engage with anglers? Which is a very good question. So we work really closely with the Angling Trust and other kind of organisations that are, you know, like the sort of recreational bodies for anglers. I think that is a really good way to sort of approach it. So they've already got really good relationships with anglers. They're obviously kind of a respected, you know, respected body in the angling community. If you're sort of talking to anglers one-on-one, I think it's definitely about thinking about how it impacts on them. So that's kind of a good thing to do with anybody, really, like think about how invasive species affect them. So with anglers, it can prevent them getting to the water, can spread diseases that will kill fish. So I think just talking about things that matter to people is quite a good way to kind of get the message to them. And this might be one that neither of us can answer, actually, but we can take it away. So are there any new effective ways to combat Japanese knotweed other than using specialist disposal? Any tried methods to utilise on site effectively to deter their growth? So I think that one is probably one, unless there's anyone from the Environment Agency on the chat who can add anything, but that is one that we can take away. There's lots of different methods that are being trialled. So things like biocontrol, stem injection. But yeah, we can take that away and add a response to the Q&A after the call. Any other questions from anyone?
I think the question on Japanese knotweed does make the point, actually, and that you make as well, Lucy, that there's, you know, constantly there are developments and there are ways forward for addressing. So although prevention is for sure the most important way in which we can tackle invasive non-native species, preventing their arrival in the first place, we of course see that early warning and rapid response is also really effective. And we can see that eradication in some cases is also really effective. So I think that, yeah, that it's going to be exciting to see the innovations going forward as to how we can also tackle invasive non-native species. So I think that question, and also the one on the harlequin ladybird, does really open up those sort of interesting thoughts that there will be future directions that we can take, but there are steps that we can also take immediately now as well to reduce that threat.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's sort of similar. It's not a management topic, but on Thursday we have a talk about using eDNA to detect invasive species. So that's kind of a newer way that we can detect things. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, I definitely recommend joining. So I don't think we have any more questions. I'll just check the chat and the Q&A. But yeah, just to say a huge thank you to you, Helen, for joining and giving such a brilliant talk. Yeah, it was a great way to start the week. And thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone else for joining as well.
And I realized I didn't put my acknowledgement slide up at the end, which would have said a huge thanks to the Non-Native Species Secretariat and to DEFRA and to Darwin Plus and to all my many collaborators. The work that I described, I mean, just the best assessment alone involved hundreds and hundreds of people, and working with the communities across the UK overseas territories and communities within Britain. It's really such an amazing privilege to be part of this community. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you all, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what the rest of the week holds. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck with all of your activities if you are taking part in anything else this week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, and thanks, Lucy. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.